to work with David Bowie, and he said we should come along, but it didn't happen. I don't know which reason it was, but there was a moment where we were quite excited about that idea, but then it didn't work out. I don't know why.
David Bowie called me, that was a surprise, and asked me to join them in Berlin in the studio. At first there was a secretary calling me and inquiring about whether I was interested at all in working with him. And I said, yeah, well, basically no problem, of course, but I would prefer to talk with David about this. And so the next one was David, and then we talked about the production, what would possibly happen. I even suggested to ask Jackie Liebetzeit, the drummer of Can, to come along, and what instruments to take along. And another few days, so that was very pleasant and inspiring, and we were looking forward to working together. And another few days on, there was another, I think it was a man this time, the third person, calling me and telling me that David had changed his mind, which as far as we know nowadays, wasn't true.
Both were kind of tricked, both then got subsequent calls saying that the other had lost interest in the project, and the suspicion is that there was somebody in Bowie's management, the kind of people that kind of, the sort of, Bowie's very commercial, very get-real side, as it were, had actually sort of placed those calls because they didn't really want Bowie's, the Bowie the cash cow to be put in jeopardy by these avant-garde projects with these obscure krautrockers.
And some years ago, David Bowie and I got in touch again. I had read in some interviews he had given 5 years ago, I think in Uncut magazine, where he said, oh, I wonder how my Berlin albums would have turned out if Michael Rother had joined me. But unfortunately, he turned me down. And that wasn't true, of course. And so he was told I had changed my mind, and I was told he had changed his mind. And I was happy to find out, and we were both, I think, quite happy to find out that neither of us had declined to work with the other one.
Bowie began recording his new album in September 1976. The resultant work, a hugely experimental piece entitled Low, would come as a bolt out of the blue to both critics and fans alike.
Straight enough, just as sort of British punk rock was starting to pass its absolute peak and starting to go mainstream, Bowie came out with this thing that nobody expected, that was completely different again. He didn't fall for the trap of, oh, I must keep up with the Young Bucks and do a punk rock album. He'd come up with something that startled everybody.
It was still a time in music when major acts were expected to change things. They're not anymore, but they were then, e.g. the new Dylan album or the new Stones album, or the new, going back a bit, obviously, Beatles album. What have they done next? And by that time, that kind of notion was kind of fading away. The Rolling Stones were doing Black and Blue, which is a piss-poor album. Led Zeppelin, well, they basically finished by then, and they were just doing that kind of heavy rock thing they've been doing for years. Nobody was making any kind of, brave statements or, going against the grain.
Possibly the only equivalence, probably in the modern era, is probably Madonna's total turnaround on Ray of Light, from making very mainstream pop records to making a record that was significantly innovative. Possibly Ray of Light and Low are probably on the same level.
I think Low is incredible because it still sounds like nothing you've ever heard. I love the fact that the record company wanted to bury it. And you can sort of understand why, because he just, you know, Young Americans was such a huge commercial record. You know, Station to Station, for its weirdness, was still had golden years on it. And then there was this.
RCA wanted to block the record. The shareholders wanted to, with RCA said, we're not allowing this, we'll take our shares out. People were demanding money up front. I know the record should have come out around Christmas of '76, but no, it was delayed all the way till January, which is a dead time in the music business. And Charles Shaw Murray in the NME went into great detail of how bad it was and a load of absolute depressing rubbish it was.
If you look at the reviews for Low, everybody's just like, this is fucking a disaster, you know, what is the guy doing, you know, he's off his tits. But the public just understood it. The public went, yeah, we get this, you know, like I said, you play that album a few times and you get it.
Low was an unprecedented listening experience, consisting in part of a series of fragmentary scattershot instrumentals, Bowie's first attempts at such. It created a sound as distinct as anything that has been heard since.
Side one is full of sort of fractured, dynamic, paranoid rock funk sketches which seem to get up ahead of steam, then fall apart after 2.5 minutes, and are all the more effective for that.
You've got these odd fragments of pop songs on the first side. Of course, they owe something to Bowie's musical heritage and tradition, but the whole thing is sort of very lopsided. You've got things like Always Crashing in the Same Car, which just sort of starts, and this sort of strange, low-key thing, the instrumentation is quite bizarre.
Every chance that I take, take it on the road with kilometers.
He's a very confused man writing that song. You know, obviously the theme is that he's always going around in circles and doing the same, repeating the same patterns, and he's trying to escape himself. And in making this record, he was trying to escape the old David Bowie and, you know, become more of an experimental artist and less of a sort of a rock messiah. It's a deeply affecting song, and sonically it's full of invention. It's almost as if every time you hear it, it shape-shifted that song. There is so much going on with the sound and the dynamic that it's really hard to pin down. It's like it's made of mercury. Always Crashing in the Same Car is a lot of people's favourite because you get a real emotion coming through that song. But Breaking Glass, What in the World, all very impactful, very visceral blows to the solar plexus almost. Tracks like Speed of Life, New Career on side one of Low sound they sound filmic somehow. Perhaps the titles give you some of that impetus, but they have a cinematic sort of movie soundtrack effect.
The instrumentals on the first side are pop songs. They're instrumental pop songs, and you know, you could easily put a lyric to either of them. And they're great, they're upbeat, they sound like film music. They're really sort of buoyant.
If you're in a new town, it's intriguing. The first several bars of that are absolutely, I mean, they really are. They do belong in a sort of, you know, they could easily sort of be made in the 21st century. They really are way ahead of his time. But then it's almost as if Bowie doesn't have it to quite pursue that all the way. And so then the kind of band comes in, there's more conventional elements like harmonica or whatever.